Om Shri Sai Ram. Pranams to the lotus feet of Bhagwan. We welcome you all to this blissful session of Bhaj Govindam. We start with our prayers. Sai Ram.
सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः।
Om Shri Sai Ram. Before we go ahead, I request everybody to please mute yourself. We have time in the end, like 5 to 10 minutes, wherein we would be having question answer session. So at that time, you can actually share all your doubts and you can have a talk directly with the trainer. Welcome to the family of Sri Satya Sai Seva Organization. Let me take this pleasure to welcome our All India President, Mr. Nimish Pandya, who is there online with us. Also, Srimati Kamla Pandya, who is our National Bal Vikas Coordinator, and Sri Anup Saxena, our State President for Mumbai Metropolitan Region. Introducing you, Mr. Subramanian Chidambaran. He hails from a family of Samvedic scholars in the Pudukot village of Palakkad district in Kerala from India. He is an electrical engineer by qualification and a postgraduate in management from IIM Lucknow. He is an MA in Sanskrit, specialization in Vedanta, and diploma in manuscriptology, both from the University of Mumbai. He has also formally studied Veda chanting for 8 years. He also conducts classes on Vedanta for online and also in person. He is currently a visiting faculty of Puranas and Vedanta at the University of Mumbai. When it comes to Carnatic music, he was initiated into it by his mother, Mrs. Bhagyam, a trained Carnatic singer herself and direct cousin of Vidwan Sri M.A. Kalyana Krishna Bhagavatar. I hand it over to Mr. Ramkumar, who is Subramanian.
Hello. You can hear me, Sabish?
Sairam, yes.
Sairam. Sairam to all. I'll share my screen. Namaskaram to all. So, welcome to this 4-day lecture series on Bhajagovindam of Acharya Shankara. It's a I must first congratulate Sabish and team for coming up with this beautiful topic, Bhajagovindam, and an apt tagline, from delusion to reality. So before I start the discussion on the verses, it's important for us to know a bit about the author of the verses, about Acharya himself. Because even if you take a corporate world, it depends on who is saying what, isn't it? If an order is given, is the lowest rung employee giving the order or the CEO of the company giving the order, it makes all the difference. So it's always important of who is speaking what. So even though the content might be very important, it's also important for us to know about the speaker, about the author who has composed that. So we'll start a bit. So today's session, I would focus on a quick overview on the life and works of Acharya, and probably we'll start with one or two verses of the Bhajagovindam today, and we will take it up ahead from tomorrow onwards. To give you a background, our dharma, we all belong to what is called as Sanatana Dharma, or it is also called as Vaidika Dharma. Vaidika Dharma means this dharma has Vedas as its basis. That is why it is called as Vaidika Dharma. The Vedas primarily speak of two aspects. They speak of the Pravritti Lakshanam and Nivritti Lakshanam. Some complex technical words, right? Let us demystify these. What do these mean? Pravritti Lakshanam means Dharma Acharanam. Satyam Vada Dharmam Chara, following Dharma, leading a righteous life. What do you do by leading a righteous life? By leading a righteous life, you do Artha Sampadanam and Kama Purti. Every human being has desires. Every human being has wishes. He wants wealth, prosperity, different kinds of things he wants to attain. All this is common to everyone. But the beauty of Sanatana Dharma is that it says, fine, you attain all that, no problem. But following Dharma, you must attain them. They must not be attained in unrighteous ways. They must be attained in righteous ways, in dharmic ways. That is why when you speak of the Purusharthas, Dharma, Artha, Kama come the first three Purusharthas. So, first knowing the Dharma, fulfill your desires, Kama Purti. Knowing the Dharma, do Artha Sampadanam, gain wealth. That is the beauty. So, this is a cycle. With Dharma as its base, you fulfill all your desires and you lead a righteous life. So, this is all about Pravritti Lakshana. Now, when you are continuously trying to fulfill your desires, you're continuously trying to expand your wishes, fulfill your wishes, be happy, and continuously this goes on and on and on. At some point of time, you start realizing that you are doing the same thing again and again. This is just like a merry-go-round, right? It comes to the same place every now and then. So you don't feel any more interest, any more juice left in doing that same thing again and again. That is when you start thinking tangentially. How do I break this monotony? How do I break this cycle? And that is when you start thinking about moksha. You're thinking about liberation from this cycle, from this monotonous cycle that you have got used to, which is called the samsara chakra. How do I break this cycle and go ahead and expand myself to understand something more about me? I have limited myself to this chakra. How do I break open this and know my fullest potential, realize my fullest potential? That is moksha. That is what is Nivritti Lakshanam. So the Vedas speak of both Pravritti Lakshanam and Nivritti Lakshanam. So if you are a person who is not interested in moksha, fine. Don't read those parts of the Vedas, just read the parts that are speaking of Pravritti Lakshanam. But at some point of time, when you realize that this Pravritti Lakshanam is not leading you anywhere, then the Vedas have the solution for you as Nivritti Lakshanam, how to attain moksha. But the beauty is that this thought of liberating yourself or breaking open the cycle can come only when you have been in the cycle round enough. You have been going round and round in the cycle enough. So Pravritti Lakshanam acts as the base for Nivritti Lakshanam. Right? So Pravritti Lakshanam is the base of the society. If 100 people are there, probably 99 people don't even want moksha. They are happy with Pravritti Lakshanam. They are happy going round and round in the merry-go-round of samsara chakra. It is probably that one person in 100 or 1,000 or 1,00,000 or 1,000,000. Adi Shankara in his Viveka Chudamani says it is the rarest of the rare person who even thinks about moksha. Very rare. But when he thinks, the solution is there in the Vedas. So this is the basic construction of the Vedas. Now, for the Nivritti Lakshanam, the Guru the one who started or taught the Nivritti Lakshanam, the Moksha Shastram, was none other than Lord Shiva himself. In the form of Dakshinamurti, he taught the Nivritti Lakshanam, the Moksha Shastram, to the Brahma Kumaras, Sanaka, Sanandana, Sanatana, Sanat Kumara. He taught to these four Brahma Kumaras, he taught the Moksha Shastra, how to liberate yourself from the Samsara Chakra. So the Guru Parampara of the Moksha Shastram or Nivritti Lakshanam starts from Sadashiva, starts from Parameshwara. From Sadashiva, it came to Narayana. From Narayana, it came to Brahma, who was born of Narayana. From Brahma, it came to his son Vasishta. From Vasishta, it came to Shakti, his son Shakti. From Shakti, it came to his son Parashara. From Parashara, it was transferred to his son Vyasa. From Vyasa, it was transferred to his son Shuka. The father-son relationship ends here. All this transfer, as you see, right from Narayana onwards, it has been transferred from the father to the son. So this father-son parampara ends here, and then it becomes Guru Shishya parampara. Even these are Guru Shishyas only, but also related as father and son. After Shuka, it comes to Gaudapadacharya. After Gaudapadacharya, it comes to Govinda Bhagavat Padacharya. So this is the Guru parampara of Nivritti Lakshanam or the Moksha Shastra. The signs of liberation. This was the lineage in which it was transmitted from one to the other. Now, as this was happening in parallel, also we had the advent of the great Gautama Buddha, the great realized soul, Gautama Buddha. After the time of Buddha, the Buddhism, the following of Buddha spread far and wide. Buddhism, of course, had very high ideals, no doubt about it. But the issue with Buddhism was it relied only on certain aspects of the Vedic religion. Satya, Ahimsa, Shanti, Prema, a few aspects of the Vedic religion, and they completely shunned away karmas or actions. The result of that was majority of the society started moving towards a state where everybody wanted to become a bhikshu. Everybody wanted to become a bhikkhu, put the saffron robe and move around because every bhikshu was respected. They were given alms. They could live happily in monasteries. So it became a luxury. The sannyasa, which has to be attained when you are renunciating everything and you have dispassion towards everything, it became a luxury. It became a very attractive option of living. That created a lot of instability and it led to the decline of Vaidika Dharma. So what happened? This Pravritti Lakshanam underwent a major problem because nobody started following Pravritti Lakshanam anymore. They all started going towards the Buddhist aspect of directly becoming a bhikshu and just roaming around for alms. So there was no Dharmacharanam. The Dharmacharanam completely came down. So Kamapurti and Artha Sampadhanam still was happening with adharmic ways, not through Dharma. And because there was a decline in the Dharmacharanam, Pravritti Lakshanam also started declining. Because Pravritti Lakshanam started declining, there is no more way that you can go to Nivritti Lakshanam because Pravritti Lakshanam is the base. Dharmacharanam is the base of the society. Without a dharmic society, you can never even aim for moksha or liberation to come. So the link completely broke off. And that is why you had this parallel parampara where right from Sadashiva onwards, this Shastra was being transmitted from one generation to the other. In this time, when this was the case, is when after Govinda Bhagavat Pada comes, the Lord again incarnated on the earth as Adi Shankaracharya. The first shloka that we said, there is a very famous shloka on Adi Shankaracharya, which says, Ajnanantar Gahanapatitan Atma Vidyopadeshaihi Tratum Lokan Bhavatavashikat Apa Papachyamanan Muktva Maunam Vadavitapinoho Mulato Nishpatanti Shambhor Murtihi Tarati Bhuvane Shankaracharya Rupam. That Shambhu, Parameshwara, who was sitting quiet, silent, under the tree, under the Vatavriksha, in Mauna Bhasha, he was called Shambhu. That Shambhu came down to the earth to rejuvenate the Sanatana Dharma as Shankara. If you see these two words, they are beautiful words. Shambhu, Shankara. Bhu means to be. In Sanskrit, the verb bhu means to be. Sham means good, auspicious. So Shiva was residing there as an auspicious being. He was quite silent and he was just there. But when he had to rejuvenate the Sanatana Dharma, which had fallen in so many traps, he could not remain silent and come down. There was no point in remaining silent anymore. So he had to become Kara. He had to start doing some karma. So that same Sham, Kara. So Sham Karoti iti Shankaraha. The one who does good to the world is Shankara. So the same Shambhu came down to the earth as Shankara. And now Swami Vivekananda says in his lectures, and now the Lord arose from the south as his young boy Shankara. He was born in the state of Kerala. So the Madhaviya Shankara Vijayam, which is one of the authentic sources, regarded to be one of the authentic sources of the life history of Adi Shankaracharya, it says, Tato Mahesha Kirakerereshu Srimad Vrishadrau Karuna Samudraha Purna Nadi Punya Tate Swayambhu Lingatmana Anangadaga Virasit. The Lord incarnated in the state, in the Pradesham of Kerala, on the banks of the Purna Punya Nadi. And before the Lord incarnated as Shankara, he also incarnated as Shiva, as a Linga form, Swayambhu Linga. Incarnated as a Swayambhu Linga, and then later on incarnated as a human in flesh and blood as Shankara. So this place where the Lord incarnated as Shiva, as a Linga, even today, if you go to the town, the city of Thrissur in Kerala, which is very close to the birthplace of Adi Shankaracharya in Kaladi, this is the place where the Lord incarnated as the Linga, Swayambhu Linga. It is called Vadakunnadan temple in Thrissur. So in this Vadakunnadan temple, the lingam is believed to be a Swayambhu lingam, which incarnated just before the advent of Adi Shankaracharya. It is also said that in this temple is what the parents of Adi Shankaracharya, Shivaguru and Aryamba, they prayed and they did a lot of worship to the lingam in this temple. And because of the prayers and worship they did to the lingam, they were blessed with Parameshwara himself born as their son, as Adi Shankaracharya. So many of you would already know the life history of Adi Shankaracharya. He was born, and even when he was young, he lost his father. He completed his Vedadhyayanam, schooling, all of that was completed. And at the age of 8, you must imagine, at the age of 8, Acharya realizes that the samsara chakram that we spoke about, he realizes that there is no more juice in this chakra and he has to liberate it and go towards the guru who can liberate himself from this chakra. Who can liberate him from this chakra. So at the age of 8, taking the permission of his mother forcibly, though, a young lad of 8 years old, he travels by foot from Kaladi down south in Kerala in search of the guru who is on the banks of the Narmada river in Madhya Pradesh, Omkareshwar. Govinda Bhagavad Pada is there. So he is going in search of the guru all the way from Kerala to Madhya Pradesh on foot. And in those days, you could have imagined, even today, you can imagine that route is entered with beautiful forests, dense forests. You can imagine how it would have been during the time of Acharya. So he travels all the way, he meets his guru, the guru takes Acharya into his fold, Shankara into his fold, initiates him into sannyasa. He stays with Govinda Bhagavad Pada for some time, and then Govinda Bhagavad Pada himself asks him to go around the country and spread the message of Vedanta Siddhanta. spread the message of Advaita. Advaita Vedantam as the Siddhantam spread all across the globe. That is when he starts his yatra towards Kashi and then goes on to different places to spread the message of Advaita Siddhantam. Now we spoke about this, right? Now how does all of these things fit? So the Acharya had come very clearly to establish the Moksha Shastram because we saw the Guru Parampara, right? Right from Sadashiva onwards, the Nivritti Lakshana Parampara is till Govinda Bhagavad Pada and from Govinda Bhagavad Pada to Adi Shankaracharya. So clearly this is the Nivritti Lakshana Guru Parampara. So Acharya had come to rejuvenate this, the Moksha Shastram, which was completely down because the entire society was away from Pravritti Lakshanam. In Nivritti Lakshanam, what is the key message? That the Supreme Lord is one. There is just one Lord for the entire universe. That Brahman, you call it Brahman, you call it whatever you want. That Supreme Lord, it is that Lord from whom this entire creation has come. In him, this entire creation is sustaining, and into him, this entire creation will dissolve. Yato va imani bhuta nijayante ye najata nijivanti yatvayant abhisambhishanti tad vijiknyasasva tad brahma. That is Brahman. That is the Supreme, which has created the world, which is sustaining the world, and into which the entire world will dissolve. And by knowing this Brahman, you will get liberated. So what is the greatness of this Brahman? This Brahman is the very form of happiness, bliss. And what is the nature of this bliss? The human happiness multiplied into infinity is the happiness of this Brahman. Where do you find this Brahman? Inside yourself. How to find it? That is the sadhana. That is the upasana. That is what you need to do. You need to make some effort, make some sadhana and upasana to find it inside yourself. So this is in a gist what the message of the Vedas or the Nivritti Lakshanam that is mentioned in the Vedas. And where do you find this? You find this in the Upanishads, the very cream of the Vedas, which is called as Vedanta, the end part or the cream part or the finest part of the Vedas, Vedanta, also called as Upanishad. That is where you find all this being mentioned. If the Vedas didn't tell us about it, we would not know about it, right? We would be stuck in that chakra itself. So what tells us that there is something beyond this chakra? The Vedas, the Upanishads tell us about it. There are so many Upanishads. So each Upanishad used a different technique to explain the same concept. So people started getting confused. Are the Upanishads saying the same thing or are they saying different things? So you had Vyasa, who had composed the Brahma Sutras to say that all Upanishads are saying the same thing. But even the Brahma Sutras, sutras means aphorisms, so they also are very difficult to understand. Even the Brahma Sutras became difficult to understand. So you had the Jagat Guru, Krishnam Mande Jagat Gurum, the Lord himself coming down in the form of Krishna and expounding in simple form, in simple language, in a more implementable format in the form of Bhagavad Gita. So the Upanishad, the highest of the truth about Brahman, which is mentioned in the Upanishad, got summarized in the Brahma Sutras and was explained more simply and more practically in the Bhagavad Gita. So this is what comprises the Moksha Shastram. This is what comprises the signs of Nivritti Lakshanam. And this is what the Acharya took up as his goal, took up as his objective to spread all across the globe about this Brahman and how to read this Brahman. So clearly the Nivritti Lakshanam became a green tick. So the Acharya was working towards propagating the Nivritti Lakshanam across the country and across the globe. But as he was traveling around the country, he very soon realized that Nivritti Lakshanam is okay, but Pravritti Lakshanam is completely down. People are not even following the basic dharmas. People are not following the basic rituals, the basic things that you need to do to tell the truth, to follow ahimsa, to feed the hungry, to feed the needy, to help the poor. Even these were not being done. So the basic, the fundamental substratum itself was not there. Then how do you build the Upanishad and Brahman on top of that? It is like Vivekananda says, what is the point in teaching Vedanta to a hungry stomach? So when that basic layer of the society itself is missing, what is the point of building on top? Acharya realized this very soon because he undertook huge travels across the country. And this is just the gist I'm going to show you. Starting right from Kerala to Madhya Pradesh and onwards, you can see the lines as they keep going. Where and all he has traveled, even to Baflika Desha, to Pakistan, modern day Pakistan, Afghanistan, Baluchistan, all those areas, because all of these places Buddhism was widely spread, even to the northeast corners. So all these aspects, Acharya has traveled and he very clearly could see the status of the society by traveling. He found that there are so many different faiths that are there. There are faiths called Vamachara, Tapalikas, Pashupatas, very fearful, very harmful sort of faiths and traditions and beliefs are there, where people kill human beings and offer a sacrifice randomly. They follow very fierce ways of tantra, following the panchamakara, like the wine, meat, women, all these aspects had creeped into the society. People were always living in fear when they would lose their near and dear ones to a Kapalika or a Pashupata. So it had become that widespread. And this all Acharya comes to know when he travels all across the country. So he realizes the pitiable situation of the people. So to such people, there is no point in speaking about Brahman at that point. Even hatred between faiths, the Shaivas and the Vaishnavas. Shaiva saying Shiva is great. So the moment a Shiva ruler comes, he will destroy all the Vishnu temples. The moment the king is a Vaishnava, he will destroy all Shiva temples and so many such atrocities. So all this was going on during the time as Acharya visited all these places. So he felt that let the Nivritti Lakshanam be there. That's fine. I have done enough to propagate Nivritti Lakshanam. But unless I propagate Dharma, the Nivritti Lakshanam is not going to sustain. So he started with Bhakti Marga. As he was traveling, he started refuting all these anti-social harmful practices, tantric rites which are evil using Vamachara, etc. And he cleansed and he wrote a book called Prapanchasara Tantra. To follow Tantra, to still follow the tantric tradition, but in the right way, which is acceptable to the Vedas, which is acceptable to the society. Reinstating worship in temples, because people had even forsaken going to the temples also. And they were following different other practices. Like in Jagannatha, Puri Jagannatha, it's a very famous story that when he had visited the Jagannatha temple, the Lord was missing there. There was no idol. It was only a Salagrama that they were worshipping. And when he inquired nearby, he found that due to foreign invasions, they had hidden away the murtis of Jagannatha, Balabhadra, and Subhadra into a big box and buried somewhere. And now it had been many years since that had passed, and nobody knew where it was. Again, the Acharya sits in dhyana, in intuition, and he finds where the Lord is. And he goes and he discovers the Lord and he reinstates the Lord in the temple. That is why the local legend says that after a lot many years, the Navakalebara, which is when the Lord is given a new body in Jagannatha temple, happened during the time of Adi Shankara. That is why even in the Jagannatha Ashtakam, you can find Jagannatha Swami Nayana Pathagami Bhavatume. Oh Jagannatha, please show me the way. Please show me where you are. Same was the case in Badrinath. As he traveled to Badrinath temple, also he found only a Salagrama. If you would see even the history of India, you can find that all the northern temples have always been attacked by invasions because they are you have the Chinese border, you have the Mongols, there are so many people across the northern border. The southern part of the country has been insulated for a long period of time. That is why the culture and tradition has been preserved for much better than what is there in the north of the country. Even Badrinath, when he went, he found only a Salagrama, and again through intuition, he found that the idol was in Narada Kunda. He dives into the Narada Kunda and gets back the idol of Badri Narayana, Badri Vishal, and he again reinstates worship there. And see the greatness of the Acharya. Badri Vishal, the Badri Narayana temple, he ensures that a Nambudri Brahmin from Kerala is worshipping in the Badri Narayana temple. So there is national integration also, so that the person of the south doesn't ignore the people in the north. There is a connection across the country and they remain united. All this Acharya does during his travels. wherever, whichever temple he goes, singing the stotras and glorifying the Lord. So many stotras we see of Acharya. When he is praising Rama, it will seem as if he is the greatest devotee of Rama. Bhajeham sada Ramachandram tvad anyam na manye na manye na manye. Other than you, I don't consider anybody as God, O Rama. When he glorifies Muruga, you feel he is the greatest Muruga Bhakta, Subramanya. When he glorifies Shiva, you feel there is no other greater devotee of Shiva rather than him. When he glorifies Vishnu, he is a Vishnu. So there is a very famous sloka in the name of Acharya which says, Antashtakto Bahishaivaha Vyavaharetu Vaishnavaha. So who was Acharya? Was he Shaiva? Was he Vaishnava? Antashtaktaha. Inner he was a Shakta, follower of Shakti, means he was having a motherly heart. His heart was full of compassion, motherly heart. Bahishaivaha. Outside he was wearing the Vibhuti and Rudraksham. So he looked like a Shaiva. Vyavaharetu Vaishnavaha. In his behavior, he was Vaishnava. That is why you have the beautiful song, Vaishnava Janato Tene Kahiye Je Peed Parai Jane Re. Narsi Mehta says, who is the Vaishnava? He has to behave like this, then only he is the Vaishnava. Only putting a gopi or a tripundra doesn't mean that he is a Vaishnava. So Acharya amalgamated. He brought a togetherness of all the faiths that existed. And he brought the Shiva, the Vishnu, the Shakti, Ganapati, Muruga, Surya, all these worships together. And he reinstated the unity in the country. Be it the path of yoga. He wrote the Yoga Taravali, which is the highest form, describing the great practices of yoga. He reinstated that again. He cleansed that path and he brought back that path of yoga. Proper practice of Tantra, which we already spoke about, Prapanchasara Tantra, the Saundarya Lahari, Lalita Trishati Bhashyam, all these aspects was written by Acharya to bring back the purer part of the different sciences that we already knew. So this part, Nivritti Lakshanam, he had already worked a lot. But now he also brought a link because the common man is not ready to accept the Nivritti Lakshanam as it is. So he has to be brought up. So through bhakti, through yoga, through tantra, through mantra, he raised the person. He laid a path for the sadhaka to move from where he is to the highest truth of moksha, to the highest state of liberation. In doing so, he composed a lot of compositions. He composed many compositions which can be categorized into three classifications. The bhashyas or the commentaries, which are of the very complicated, which is for the higher sadhaka. Sadhaka who's already crossed several steps and he is now in a state where he can grab Nivritti Lakshanam just like that. For that person, bhashya is fine. For the next person, he also has to attain moksha. See, there was one basic philosophy. Liberation is not the birthright of only a few people. Like Lokmanya Tilak said, Swaraj is my birthright and we have different right to education, right to speech. Everybody has the right to. Similarly, right to liberation, everybody has. Each and every being that is born has a right to get liberated from the samsara chakra. So if every being has a right to get liberated, then you should have paths laid down for every being. And all the beings may not be at the same spiritual level to understand the Vedantam and Upanishad and Nivritti Lakshanam just like that. So for the people who are already in that state, Bhashyam is okay. For people who are slightly lower, you had something called as the Sakarana Granthas. They are the beginner courses. So that is the advanced course and this is the beginning course, like the Viveka Chudamani, the beginner course. And if people are not even in that state, then you had the Stotras, the Stotra literature. You like Krishna? Okay, I have a sloka on Krishna. Stand. You like Shiva? Okay, I have a stotra on Shiva. Stand. But through the stotra, I will tell you how to attain liberation. You keep chanting the stotra only, but with devotion. But through that, I will tell you how to attain liberation. That is stotra literature. This is the beauty of the literature of Acharya, who catered to everybody because he wanted everybody. He was of the strong opinion that everybody has a right to liberation. And what we're going to do over the next 3 days, Bhadagovindam comes under the stotra. You can be relieved, relaxed, that you don't have to necessarily pass any exams or qualifications, for which are required probably for the other two categories. You can very well be relieved that we are all in the basic rung of the ladder, and we are all going to start with Bhajagovinda. So it's a good thing. Bhajagovindam is also called as Moha Mudgaram. Actually, the name of this literature is Moha Mudgaram. It is not Bhajagovindam. Bhajagovindam, it got the name just because it starts with Bhajagovindam. Just like the Ishavasya Upanishad, it says Ishavasyam idam sarvam. So it was given the name Ishavasya Upanishad. Keneshitam Preshitam Manaha. The Upanishad started, so it became Keno Upanishad. So by the starting word itself, the name was given. Similarly, because the starting word of this literature is Bhajagovindam, we call it Bhajagovindam. But the name of this is Moha Mudgaram. What is Moha? Moha means delusion. Delusion. That means you are knowledgeable. You are an intelligent person, but you have got deluded. That means you are assuming something for something else. You are not seeing the right picture. You have got all deluded. You are all assuming all wrong things, all misunderstandings have come and clouded your mind. So that is Moham. Mudgaram means what? Maybe I'll show you the picture. This is Mudgaram. Rather than explaining by words, I think the picture speaks more. Got it? So with this pestle, you have to hit the head of the person with moha. That is literally the language that Acharya uses. Take this pestle and hit the person on the head. Very hard that he comes to his senses. Who is in this moha, who is in this delusion state, he comes out of it and then realizes what is the truth. So the stotras of Bhajagovindam are under three categories. First is to make you aware of the reality of the world. We saw the pestle, right? Hit with the pestle continuously. See, as much hard as you can hit. But the person should become aware of the reality of the world. That is the objective of the first set. The second set, now the person has become aware. Now the question is, okay, now what do I do? He knows that all this is crap. I need to get to liberation, that is the highest. What do I do? The next step, sadhana. And the third state is the state of realization. What do you do? What is the beautiful state of realization? An expression of that. So this is how the different stages are there in the stotras, or you can classify the stotras of Bhajagovindam as. Probably we have around 8:42. So I think we can probably do a few minutes of Bhajagovindam and then move ahead. Sabish, is that okay?
Sairam, we have already crossed the timing for today.
Okay. So what we can do is probably we'll start with the stotras tomorrow. So at least today, the important thing was for me to give you a background of Acharya, who has composed the Bhajagovindam. So you should know who has composed it and what is the greatness of this person who has composed it, and what credibility and authenticity the person has, and a background of Bhajagovindam itself. Now, with this background is what we will start with the stotras of Bhajagovindam from the session tomorrow. Sairam.
Sairam.
So if anybody has any questions, you can probably ask now. Sabish, we have some 4 to 5 minutes.
Yeah, we have 5 minutes with us.
Okay. So if you have any quick questions, you can ask today. But anyway, we have the next 3 days as well, where we can spread out the questions also.
So any questions, you can unmute yourself and please ask. Sairam.
Yeah. Sairam, there is a question in the chat box. I have missed half an hour of the session. So how can I see it? So kindly address it.
Sairam Vibha, we will be sharing the YouTube link. It is going live there, and recording is also there.
This is the question.
Yeah.
With respect to the subject today, like anybody has any question?
So the good thing is probably it has become Nisandeha. It's become very extremely clear to all, or probably it does not become clear at all. So it can be either of these two options.
Unable to unmute Yamuna.
So I have one to say really clear.
RK, very clear, huh? It was wonderful. That's why there are no questions.
Sairam Didi, there's somebody named Yamuna. She wants to ask something, but she's unable to unmute herself. So can you type it in the chat box?
Yeah, she can
If
type
you're
it out.
hearing,
Yeah, that is better.
yeah. If you have any questions, please type it in the chat box.
Sairam sir, the presentation was extremely good and was very easy to understand. One question I have, very practical question. Acharya took across the country he went, so he went on foot only. So what is the time he took for all that movement and all that in the 32 years, or it was much less than that, his lifetime?
Okay, so there are a few aspects about the Acharya which is very difficult to deep dive for a normal person like us, okay, in a very scientific way. The reason I say that is, as I already mentioned, Acharya was not just a Vedantin or one who has learned the Vedas and the Vedantas and the Upanishads. He was an avatara, which is clear from the aspects of if one single person has to cleanse and give a new path to Tantra, to Mantra, to Yoga, to Bhakti, to Upanishads, to Vedas, and all these aspects, it definitely has to be somebody extremely suprahuman. When you have such people, and you have in yoga and tantra and all, you have various levels of existence, okay, not just the physical level, metaphysical levels. So the yogas, they speak about different siddhis in which people don't need to necessarily travel on foot, to cover a particular distance. By their very sankalpa, they go from one place to the other. And there are aspects like this. These are not documented evidences, but what we know of is the most common accepted thing is that he lived for 32 years. His mortal body was there for 32 years on the earth. And he did all this within the span of 32 years. So rather than saying whether he traveled on foot and he was able to cover, I would say he covered it. How he covered it is left to him, is best known to him.
Right.
Yeah.
Bhaiya, there's one more question from Yamuna ji. From where and when did Adi Shankaracharya compose the Bhaja Govindam? So when and where basically?
Yeah, so there is a very popular story that in Kashi, when the Acharya was in Kashi, and he actually was walking across the Ganga, on the banks of the Ganga, he saw a person, a very old man, reading the grammar book, the Vyakarana. That is when that suddenly inspired something in the Acharya to say that this old man is about to die anytime. And at this moment, when he knows that death is very near, he is still so much engrossed in the world, in that samsara chakra. He is not thinking of getting liberated out of this chakra. So that compassion towards that person, coming in the form of anger and everything is what people say led to the composition of the Bhaja Govinda. Now, when Acharya has come to Kashi multiple times, the first time is when he first moved from Omkareshwar at the age of 10 years or 12 years. At that age, when he moved from Madhya Pradesh to Kashi, the first he went, that was the first time. After that also, he has come to Kashi multiple times on his travels on the north, etc. So it could be during either of these times that he did this. Or he saw this person and he composed the Bhaja Govinda. So it could be either of these times. We don't have any specific thing to say that only this was the time when he composed it.
I have a question. Did Acharya, when his mother was about to pass away, was he there by her bedside before she died?
Yes.
Okay.
Because he promised her before he left, before he took sannyasa and he left from Kaladi, he had promised her that when the time comes, he will be back.
And he was back.
Yes, and he knew when the time was near, intuitively he knew that his mother was in her last stage, and he appeared in Kaladi along with his Shishya, along with one of his disciples. He comes to Kaladi. He stays with her for a few days,
Okay.
And he does the greatest thing. He ensures, because even in our Shastras they say that the greatest duty of the putra or a putri is to liberate the parents. The reason you have a child is that the child can liberate you, not that it can, put you more into samsara. It has to liberate you from samsara. Knowing this is what the Acharya, it is said that during those days, he ensured that all the vasanas and impressions that were there in the mother, because of the what she had gained over previous births, all of them slowly are completely removed. And finally, when she was in her final stage, she was completely liberated already. She was already a Jivan Mukta, and he ensured that she becomes a Jivan Mukta before she gets liberated. That is the greatness of the Acharya. And of course, as somebody has rightly put here, he definitely composed the Matra Panchakam as an ode to not just his mother, but to all the mothers. That motherhood, the quality of being a mother, is what he pays tribute to in the Matra Panchakam.
Sairam Bhaiya, I think so it will be the last question for today. Somebody has asked, how many shlokas are there in Bhaja Govindam?
Yeah. So even when I was going through for preparing this one, there are many versions, but most commonly accepted 31 shlokas are most commonly accepted. There are a couple of additions which are more in terms of the final shlokas or summarizing who composed it and all those, which are not typically considered as a part of the content. Even the 31 shlokas, many people say only 12 shlokas were composed by Acharya and the remaining were composed by his Shishyas. But to us, it doesn't matter. We consider 31 because that has been commonly taken by most of our gurus, most of our Mahatma Acharyas. They have taken 31 shlokas and given explanation to that. So we go with the 31 shlokas as our base, and we will be dealing with them in the next 3 days.
Sai Ram. Thank you, Subramanian, for your time. And I thank all the participants over here, who have taken their time to and join us for this wonderful session. We close this session of today's with our closing prayers. After that, as a practice, we have Sai Gayatri chanting from 9 o'clock to 9:15, which we are doing it for the world peace and world health. So we would be doing it over here also through the Zoom link and the YouTube link. So people who are free, they're most welcome to join us onto the same. But please keep yourself on mute during the prayers. Thank you very much. Sai Ram.
समस्तलोका सुखिनो भवन्तु समस्तलोका सुखिनो भवन्तु समस्तलोका सुखिनो भवन्तु शांति शांति जय बोलो भगवान श्री सत्य साई बाबा जी की जय।
Sairam, everybody. We will be starting with Sai Gayatri prayers for 15 minutes from 9 o'clock onwards. I request whomsoever can attend it, they can be online and chant with us. But please keep your mute. Keep yourself on mute.